Hello, my name is Clement Leung, and today I would like to explore with you the link between computers and music. And instead of doing this in a computer lab, we shall make use of a piano. And we're going to use a kind of fun way to illustrate the ideas, and hopefully we'll learn something interesting in the process. And the ideas that we're going to explore include the following: Fibonacci numbers and the piano, and then the golden ratio, which occurs quite a lot in works of art and architecture. We shall be looking at algorithms, which can be regarded as the essence of computer science. We shall look at MIDI, which gives highly precise instructions for playing music. And then we shall consider searching of information, in particular multimedia information. And we also mention some open problems in computer science. It's very interesting because the piano is actually based on something called the Fibonacci series of numbers. So, well, in fact, if we look at these numbers, so there's two here, the two black keys, and then there's the three black keys, right? 1 plus 2 is 3, right? So the next Fibonacci number,
5.
right? 5, and that's 3, 2, 3, and then 5. And then 5, and then you get the 8, which is the scale, sometimes known as the major scale. So that's 8 numbers, right? So in fact, and then the next number is actually 13, right? So 13 is actually all the notes, right? So
8
so
plus
that's exactly 13 notes there. And now one other aspect about a piece of music is such that it's not just the melody, right? But it's also the harmony. Right, so one of the nice things about the piano is such that it's got both the melody and the harmony. Now other instruments, now you play the saxophone too, right? And the saxophone, a single saxophone, don't give you the harmony.
Yes.
It gives you only the melody, right? The piano actually includes the melody. Now, if we look at the harmony structure, in fact, I have a particular interest in harmony, and it's actually also based on these numbers, right? So you've got the 3, 5, 8. Right, so if you count them, so that's the 3rd, 5th, and the 8th. So that is known as the major chords.
Yeah.
So in fact, this is the foundation harmonic structure for Western music. Right, so it's actually based on the major chords. So everything starts usually with the major chords, right? And then, in a certain key, also ending with the major chords. Right? So anything else is actually not very satisfying. And now, in fact, if you look at these numbers, so it leads to something called the golden ratio. So perhaps we can just look at things in slightly greater detail. Now, Leonardo Fibonacci, he was Italian. He was born in 1170. He lived roughly 800 years ago. Now, his series of numbers, called the Fibonacci series, is extremely simple. You start with two numbers, 1 and also 1. Now, how do you form the third number? It's very easy. You just add up the previous two numbers. So you've got 1 plus 1 equals 2, and then 1 plus 2 equals 3, and then 2 plus 3 equals 5, and so on. So mathematically, it can be indicated by this particular formula. Now, the Fibonacci series can be explained in terms of the reproduction of rabbits. Start with a pair of newly born rabbits, male and female.
they're able to mate at the age of 1 month, so that at the end of its 2nd month, a female can produce another pair of rabbits. Suppose rabbits never die, and a mating pair always produces 1 new pair every month from the 2nd month onwards. Now the question is, how many pairs will there be at the end of each month? And this is simply given by the Fibonacci series. So you've got 1, right? So that's at the end of the 2nd month, it produces this new pair, including itself, that's 2 pairs. And so on. And then you've got 3, and then you've got 5. Now, if we look at the piano, the arrangement of keys on the piano also follows the Fibonacci sequence, right? So here we look at the 2 black keys here, right? So they're forming a group together, 2 of them. And then we've got 3 black keys over there, right? So 2 and 3. And together we've got 5 black keys, right? So that's 2, 3, 5. Now, if we look at the white keys, so that's actually 8 of them, which forms the major scale. So that's the 8 white keys major scale. And if we consider all the keys together, the black keys and the white keys together, it actually forms 13 keys, sometimes known as the chromatic scale. If we examine the limiting ratio of the Fibonacci sequence, then we've got this number called the golden ratio, and that's roughly 1.62. And this is known variously as the divine proportion or golden rectangle. And so, for example, here we're showing some different illustrations of this golden ratio, and with architectures and musical instruments. Here, the dimension of the violin is illustrated, and that's the length and the width ratio, and also the Mona Lisa as well.
Hello, Professor. I have a question. What is the most important area of computer science?
Right. Now, computer science, I think if you choose one word, which is considered the most important in computer science, is the word algorithm. Right? So what is an algorithm? Right? You'll be writing programs, and a lot of people have been writing programs. But basically, an algorithm is a step-by-step procedure or instructions for getting something done, for doing something. Right? So originally, the word algorithm was used for calculations, step-by-step for calculations. But of course, we can generalize. It doesn't have to be calculations. It can be anything. For example, right? Some of you may want to do some cooking, right? So bake a cake, for example. So that's a kind of algorithm, right? You can actually add some flour, some sugar, some milk, and chocolate, and other things, and put it in the oven for 3 hours or something. That's an algorithm, right? So in fact, in playing music, it is a kind of algorithm as well, right? Because you're actually following the instructions, the music score, for example. So that sort of music score, and then you simply follow the sequence of instructions for playing it, and then, well, in fact, well, Kristen, why don't you execute this algorithm?
Okay, I'm going to execute the Amazing Grace.
Good. Very good, thank you. It's a very nice song, beautiful song. And so Kristen executes the algorithm very well, right? So now you actually sort of go to concerts with well-known pianists, violinists, cellists, and other people, right? They're actually executing the instructions, right? Now, a lot of people think that a good performance is following the instructions extremely precisely. When you're very precise in doing that, you're doing a good performance. Now, of course, in computer science, we don't just work with scores, which is something you humanly read and process the information, but you actually use something called MIDI, Right? MIDI stands for Musical Instruments Digital Interface. Right? So that's a digital interface, and it gives you a lot of instructions for playing. Right? So for example, here on a piano, for example, loudness would be indicated by a lot of Fs, right? Is that right?
F.
And what about softness?
P.
P's, right? So a lot of P's would be very soft, right? Now, in the case of MIDI, it uses 7 bits, right? A bit is simply is a binary digit, either 0 or 1, right? It's used 7 bits to denote the loudness information, which it's called velocity on, right? When you strike a key with a high velocity, of course, it's loud. If it's a very sort of low velocity, then it's much softer, right? So in fact, it's got 127 levels, right? If you include 0, that's 128 levels, which is exactly 2 to the power 7, using 7 bits to do it. Now, for a good pianist, maybe they can manage 30 levels. But in the case of MIDI, it's very precise, 128 levels of that kind of loudness information. Right, so in fact, so the execution, therefore, is much more precise.
So, Professor, I want to ask, what's your research topic and how it relates to music?
Right. Now, in fact, my research is actually concerned with multimedia search. Right. Now, in fact, when computers were first invented, they were mainly designed to deal with calculations and mathematics and symbol manipulation. But there's no pictures, no sounds, no videos, and other things, right? And then, of course, later on, this kind of constraint is being relaxed, right? So you're seeing watching movies on the computer, right? And MP3s even. And now, in fact, it's because of the initial limitation of the computer that you lead to the invention of this term multimedia. Because I think the term multimedia is extremely artificial. And so, in fact, when we're interacting like this, when I'm talking with you like this, you're asking questions like this, you know, we use the piano and other things, we're actually interacting in a multimedia way already. So the natural world is always multimedia. There's nothing new about multimedia. But because of the limitation of the computer and the relaxation of that limitation, then we use multimedia. Now, it's interesting, though. The computer is pretty good in doing calculations, mathematics and other things, and simple string matching. But it's actually not very good in multimedia. For example, when you, well, let's say you want to look for a picture of yourself riding on a pony many years ago. And so you collected many pictures of yourself. Then you present all the pictures to the computer. The computer cannot identify the right one because it does not know how to recognize objects in images. Now, all these things can be done by a 2-year-old child, right? You show the 2-year-old child these pictures, he can easily find the one with him or you riding on a pony, right? So, in fact, so these are challenging problems for computer science. Now, what about searching things? Now, you can search things by conventional methods. Now, you've all done database in SQL, right? And now you can treat, well, let's say a picture or a piece of music as a student, right? You've got student records. You put your student number, your student ID, right? And your address, telephone number, your grades, your address and things. That would be stored in a university kind of database, right? You can store information about a piece of music like that as well. Now, if you store it like that, however, you can only retrieve using that kind of information. Right? You cannot retrieve information you have not told the computer. Right? So, for example, I might want to retrieve a piece of music by many other attributes. In fact, people have come up with the idea that a typical piece of music would have several hundred attributes to it. So, for example, you can have attributes, not just the title. The title is trivial, right? And the composer, the singer is always trivial. But information like, is there an octave guitar playing somewhere? Right? You want to have the guitar sound, but it's actually playing in octave form. And you also have things like different beats and rhythms, like bossa nova, samba, and things. And you can also have a syncopation. You can also have piano block chords, right? Like the Russian composers, the great concertos, it's typically a lot of piano block chords. So again, all these things are actually would form the basis of a retrieval. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just a melody to a song, but it's also the harmony. Now, sometimes you actually want to retrieve based on harmony information, right? And the kind of harmony information may be, as I've indicated already, we'll discuss in terms of chords. Right, okay. Now, so we see that, right? So we have this harmonic structure of C, A minor, F, and then G, right? And then C again, A minor, right? F, 7, right? So perhaps, Kristen, you can actually keep playing this.
Okay.
And then I'll insert some common melodies. In fact, you'll be surprised that there are quite a few songs that follow this kind of pattern.
Okay. Right, so in fact, if I want to retrieve something like that, that's a very hard problem for the computer. It cannot do it, right? So in fact, we see that sometimes we do want to retrieve things by harmony, just like this one. Now, this is a very simple structure. You can have more complicated chords, things like, well, let's say the F13 chord. I want to know something with a piece of music with that chord used, and that's very hard.
Right, are you ready for a challenge? The challenge is that you're going to solve a problem that the computer cannot solve. Later on, I'm going to play a piece of music, and your job is to determine the basic chord sequence of that piece of music. And that is the third prize. You use the basic simple chord sequences. The second prize is more involved. From the music, you determine the more detailed chord sequence. So for example, if the chord C major 7 is used, you should indicate C major 7 rather than just C. In the case of the first prize, from the music, you should produce the complete music score, including the detailed harmony and also the melody. Note that these prizes follow the Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3.
you.